"No plate for you, Mom. You didn't even bring anything." The room didn't fall silent. It just shifted. A few guests gave nervous laughs. One of the cousins chuckled like it was an inside joke. I stood there frozen, holding a flimsy plastic plate and a matching fork, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. Michelle didn't even look up as she said it. She was too busy slicing the turkey, chatting with her in-laws like I hadn't just arrived from another state after a 2-hour bus ride. I caught the eye of my granddaughter across the room. She quickly looked away. I swallowed the sting and stepped back. The main table was full anyway, all 12 seats taken, even though I'd RSVP'd 3 weeks ago. Someone handed me a glass of water, maybe out of pity. I took it, nodded, and sat at the far end of the kitchen island near the toaster and the recycling bin. My pies sat untouched on the side counter, still wrapped in foil. I'd held them carefully on my lap the whole way down, afraid the crusts would crack. 1 chocolate pecan, 1 apple crumble. Recipes passed down from my mother. Not store-bought, not trendy, but always gone by the second slice. Until now. Michelle never asked if I needed anything. No offer of coffee, no seat pulled out. Just that sentence, sharp, clean, and meant to cut. I looked around the room at the faces I'd known for years. My son-in-law's parents, Michelle's college friend, a neighbor I'd met once. All of them had plates. My stomach wasn't hungry anymore, but my heart, it twisted in a way that was too familiar. I placed the plate and fork quietly on the counter and folded my hands in my lap. No one noticed. At the other end of the room, Michelle laughed loudly at something her husband said. Her voice used to be soft around me. Now it carried like I wasn't even in the house. Michelle opened the door with one arm still damp, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. "Hey, Mom," she said, giving me a quick side hug that felt more like a shoulder bump. "Can you take your shoes off? I just mopped." I stepped in carefully, balancing my pies and overnight bag. The air smelled like lemon disinfectant and cinnamon candles, sharp and artificial. She walked away before I could ask where to put anything. The guest room was half done. No pillow, just a bare mattress with a wrinkled fitted sheet. A towel was draped over the bathroom doorknob like an afterthought. I set the wrapped books and envelope on the dresser. 2 novels for the kids, a card with $100 tucked inside. No one came in, no one said thank you. I washed my hands and sat on the edge of the bed until I heard voices call out, "It's ready." I followed the sound to the dining room where plates were already being filled. Glasses poured, conversations halfway started. No one looked up when I entered. Then her voice, my daughter's, rang out, "You didn't even bring anything." From my angle, I could see the main table lit by candles and laughter. Michelle sat between her husband and his mother, smiling effortlessly, handing out cranberry sauce like she hadn't just pushed me aside. There was no place card for me, no acknowledgement that I had arrived that morning with a suitcase, pies, and shaking knees from the cold. I stared at the untouched pies still on the kitchen counter. They didn't belong here either. The pies sat exactly where I'd left them. Not moved, not sliced, not even acknowledged. The foil was still tucked tight around the edges, the handwritten labels untouched. Chocolate pecan in blue ink, apple crumble in red. They were supposed to be the end of the meal, the little touch I always brought. I hadn't said it out loud, but I'd hoped someone would say, "Oh, Mom made her pies," and the room would soften for just a moment. Instead, a plastic tray of mini cheesecakes made its way around the table, store-bought, labeled, flavorless. My granddaughter sat next to me, fidgeting with her fork. She glanced at the counter, then leaned in. "Mom says your baking's kind of weird," she whispered like it was something shameful. "Too crumbly or something." I smiled, not tight, not angry, just practiced. I thought about the first pie I ever made. It was for the community bake sale back when Michelle was 8. She bragged about it to her teachers, called it the best pie in the world. We stayed up late in the kitchen together, peeling apples, her fingers sticky with cinnamon and sugar. Now she ordered desserts off an app. Neat, uniform, forgettable. I turned back to the room and saw Michelle laughing with her in-laws, her voice high and polished. I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize her. No one asked about these pies. No one offered to slice them. I thought for a second about getting up and doing it myself. But then what? Pass them around like samples at a supermarket? Beg them to pretend they wanted some? Instead, I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap. It's a strange thing watching your care go stale, not because it lost its sweetness, but because the people you made it for decided they prefer it wrapped in plastic, printed with a barcode. I looked at the label again, the one I'd written that morning before the bus. Made with love. Apparently, that wasn't the flavor they wanted anymore. After the dishes were cleared and the noise faded into background chatter, Michelle handed me a tied-up trash bag and asked if I could toss it into the bin by the garage. "It's too full already," she added like I was staff. I didn't argue. I needed the air. Outside, the cold bit through my sleeves. I lifted the lid of the overflowing bin and pushed the bag in, trying not to let anything spill. That's when I saw it curled near the edge, barely visible through a layer of crumpled napkins and an empty wine bottle. A receipt. I don't know why I pulled it out. Reflex maybe, or habit. I spent years checking Michelle's pockets when she was a teenager, piecing together late-night fast food runs and shopping sprees she never admitted to. But this was no burger and fries. 282,047 from Corwin Market, the upscale grocery store across town, dated 3 days ago. Full Thanksgiving spread, whole herb-roasted turkey, truffle mashed potatoes, a pre-sliced ham, imported cheeses, 2 bottles of Merlot. I kept reading, card ending in 7814. My card. I felt my fingers go cold in a new way. That account was only supposed to be for emergencies. Michelle had asked to use it once during a car repair and kept the number just in case. I had never officially given her permission to use it again, but clearly she hadn't needed permission. She bought the dinner with my money and then looked me in the face and said, "You didn't even bring anything." I folded the receipt carefully, as if it might disintegrate, slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan, walked back inside. The laughter had returned, glasses clinking, people thanking Michelle for going all out this year. She beamed. "She didn't thank me. Of course she didn't. She hadn't even told me." I poured myself a glass of water from the tap and sat back down at the kids' table. Suddenly, the pies didn't feel like an afterthought anymore. They felt like the only thing I'd brought that wasn't taken. I lay on the edge of the guest bed that night, still fully dressed, my coat folded beneath my head like a makeshift pillow. The house had gone quiet, except for the occasional sound of silverware being loaded into the dishwasher downstairs. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't want to dream of this house. Instead, I drifted backward. Michelle had been 11 the last time Thanksgiving felt like it belonged to me. She wore an apron 3 sizes too big, hair tied in a crooked ponytail. She followed me around the kitchen like a shadow, asking if she could taste the cranberry sauce, licking the back of the spoon when she thought I wasn't looking. We'd set the table together. Real plates, cloth napkins, mismatched silverware that we polished by hand. James carved the turkey while telling a story that had everyone laughing, even if they'd heard it a dozen times before. The house smelled like cloves and butter and home. Michelle had clung to my arm that night. She'd fallen asleep against my shoulder while the credits rolled on a Charlie Brown special. I remembered the weight of her head on my chest, the feeling that I was the center of her world, even just for one more year before adolescence changed everything. It was the last time I felt truly needed. Not tolerated, not managed. I turned over and stared at the ceiling, painted beige and bare. The overhead light had a soft flicker, the kind you only notice when everything else is still. I had become background noise in my own child's life. An accessory pulled out and dusted off when convenient, dismissed when inconvenient. She hadn't asked me to come this year. I had invited myself, and now I knew I shouldn't have. Downstairs, a cabinet closed. Footsteps moved through the kitchen. I listened, breath shallow, wondering if Michelle had found the receipt yet, wondering if it would even matter if she did. By the time the sky began to lighten behind the kitchen window, I was already dressed and sitting at the small breakfast nook with a lukewarm cup of coffee in front of me. Michelle kept the cheap kind, bitter and thin, but it would do. I took out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My fingers didn't tremble. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Something about last night had burned through all of that. What was left wasn't grief. It was decision. The first call was to the credit card company. I answered the security questions, confirmed the last charge, and closed the account. The woman on the line asked if I wanted to dispute the charge. I said no. Let Michelle keep the groceries. Let her enjoy every last bite. The second call was to Richard Monroe, the attorney who'd helped me set up my estate plan after James passed. He picked up on the third ring, groggy but polite. "I need to update my will," I said, "today if possible." There was a pause. Then, "Of course, Maria, do you want to come into the office?" "No, I'll email you the instructions. I just want it on record that my daughter is no longer a beneficiary. Remove her completely, and the new recipient, the Reading Roots Foundation for Children, use it all. The house, the savings, the retirement. He didn't ask why. That's what I liked about Richard. He handled things with grace. After we hung up, I poured the rest of the coffee down the sink and rinsed the mug. I moved through the kitchen quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. Not because I cared about their rest, but because I didn't owe them a single goodbye. The house was still asleep when I slipped my bag over my shoulder and stepped quietly into the entryway. I didn't bother with the lights. I knew where everything was, where they'd left me, where they hadn't looked. The pies were still on the counter, exactly as I'd left them. I took a moment to wrap them a little tighter in foil. Then I walked them to the front door and placed them carefully on the steps, side by side, like offerings that no one had asked for. I paused at the base of the stairs, listening for footsteps. Nothing. Back in the guest room, I folded the card and the books I'd brought for the kids into my tote bag. I thought about leaving them anyway, letting the children know I'd remembered, but it felt hollow now. Gifts didn't mean much when they came from someone your mother told you to ignore. No note, no message, no loud door slam or parting shot. Just the sound of my boots on the front path, the slow hiss of my breath in the cold morning air. The 9:00 a.m. bus came early. I was the only one at the stop. I took the seat by the window and watched as the suburban streets blurred into frost-tipped trees and cracked sidewalks. My hands rested on the tote in my lap, still full, still mine. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself or wonder if I was overreacting. The decision had already been made by them long before I ever dialed Richard's number or canceled the card. They just never expected me to notice. As the bus rolled back toward New Hampshire, the sky cracked open with morning light. It wasn't a new beginning. It didn't need to be. It was simply the first morning in years where I didn't feel the need to prove I mattered. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket, then again. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I got home just before noon. The apartment smelled like books and dryer sheets, familiar and still. I slipped off my coat, set my bag down by the door, and filled the kettle. The silence didn't press down on me the way it used to. It felt earned now, like peace instead of absence. I made coffee and sat by the window, feet tucked beneath me, watching the bare trees shift in the wind. I hadn't said a word since I left Michelle's house, and I didn't feel the need to break that rhythm. The phone buzzed once on the table. I let it sit for a moment, then flipped it over. "Michelle, where'd you go? The kids were asking about you." I stared at the message, reread it. There was no sorry about last night. No, I shouldn't have said that. Not even a thank you for anything. Not the pies, the visit, the years. Just a vague suggestion that I disappeared without explanation. Another buzz. "Michelle, can you send your PIN? Your card isn't working." Of course it wasn't. I set the phone face down. Didn't reply. Didn't fume. I'd already made my decision yesterday in the early morning hours while the house was still dark and cruel. That card was canceled. That door was closed. And that silence, it wasn't punishment. It was the sound of me taking back everything I'd been giving without question. For years, I had explained myself, defended myself, excused her behavior. I'd softened my voice, lowered my expectations, stayed longer than I should have just to keep the peace. But this time, the peace was mine. I took a slow sip of coffee, let the bitterness sit on my tongue before swallowing. Then I powered off the phone completely, placed it in the drawer beside my reading chair, and pulled a blanket over my lap. If Michelle truly wanted to know where I'd gone, she could start by looking at where she left me. Because I didn't vanish, I simply stopped waiting to be seen. 2 days later, my book club met at my apartment. I set the table early. Nothing fancy, just my favorite mugs, linen napkins I'd bought on clearance years ago, and the good plates I rarely used. I baked pecan pie and apple crumble again. The women arrived in layers of scarves and soft conversation. They hugged long, placed their jackets on the arm of the couch, and walked straight into my kitchen without asking. It was the kind of familiarity that feels earned, not assumed. Joan took a bite of the pecan pie and closed her eyes. "Oh, Maria, you've been holding out on us." Laughter rose and spilled through the room. I hadn't realized how quiet my home had been until it filled with their voices. Mara asked for the apple crumble recipe, scribbling it onto the back of her library due date slip. Ruth reached for seconds before anyone else had finished. No one waited for permission, and no one needed to. We didn't talk about Thanksgiving. No one asked about Michelle, but they lingered over every bite. They praised the crust, the texture, the way the filling wasn't too sweet. They noticed things that mattered to me. I didn't say it out loud, but something inside me loosened. After they left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time rinsing dishes and drying them by hand. The light was soft, the kind that doesn't beg for attention. I liked that. Before I sat down, I took a small piece of tape and a scrap of paper. I wrote 4 simple words and stuck it to the fridge. "You are not invisible." I stepped back and looked at it. Not a declaration, just a reminder. Then I poured myself the last cup of coffee, pulled out my journal, and turned to a fresh page. Weeks passed without a word, and I didn't expect one. The silence had become a kind of rhythm. I welcomed it. No sharp edges, no forced smiles, just stillness. Then one morning, buried between promotional emails and newsletters I never subscribed to, there it was. Subject: I've been meaning to reach out. It was from Michelle. I hovered over the message for a few seconds before opening it. 3 paragraphs. The first was filled with vague regret. I didn't mean for things to come out that way. Thanksgiving was stressful. I was overwhelmed. The second tried to explain. I didn't realize how hurt you were. I thought you were just tired. We didn't mean to leave you out. And the third was the only part that felt remotely honest. The kids miss you. They've been asking when you're coming back. Not once did she say she was sorry. She used the word misunderstanding 3 times. I closed the email without replying. That afternoon, I printed the updated will. Thick paper, clean lines, my signature in blue ink. Michelle's name was nowhere on it. I folded it neatly, placed it in the fireproof box in the back of my closet, and locked it with a soft click. Then I lit a small candle and placed it next to James's photo on the mantel. He would have understood. He'd always seen what I tried not to. This wasn't revenge. I didn't need them to hurt. I just needed the ache in my own chest to stop taking up so much space. I looked around the room. The worn armchair, the stack of library books, the last sliver of pie in the fridge. Everything I had left was mine, and enough. I sat down with my journal, turned past the pages filled with what-ifs, and wrote 3 words on a fresh line. I released them, not with anger, not even with sadness. Just the steady hand of someone who finally understood that love is not owed when it's used as leverage. And absence, when chosen, can be the loudest kind of truth. Not with anger, not even with sadness. Just the steady hand of someone who finally understood love is not owed when it's used as leverage. And absence, when chosen, can be the loudest kind of truth. I closed the journal softly, feeling the weight of the pages shift under my palm. The apartment hummed faintly, the soft buzz of the refrigerator, the whisper of the heat kicking on, the almost silence that comes only when a place belongs entirely to you. For the first time in a long time, I felt that quiet settle with me instead of on me. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the mailbox in my slippers, the cold tile in the hallway biting gently at my feet. The building smelled faintly of detergent and someone's cooking downstairs. Onions, maybe, or garlic sizzling in a pan. Inside the mailbox, along with grocery store flyers and a pension statement, was a small envelope addressed in Michelle's handwriting. I stood there for a moment, thumb tracing the corner. Not angry, not hopeful, just steady. I didn't open it right away. I tucked it under my arm and carried it back upstairs with the rest of the mail. I set everything on the kitchen table, boiled water for tea, and only when the mug was warm in my hands did I sit down and open the envelope. Inside was a card, a generic floral one from a grocery store rack. The inside read, "Mom, I didn't mean for things to come out the way they did. I think we were all stressed. I hope we can talk soon. The kids miss you. Michelle." No apology. Not really. Just more of the same. Misunderstanding, stress, kids miss you, hope we can talk. I placed the card back in the envelope and slid it inside the drawer of the kitchen table. Not thrown away, not displayed. Just put aside, exactly where it belonged. The next morning, I woke without an alarm. Light brushed through the curtains, soft and pale. I brewed coffee, sliced a small piece of leftover apple crumble, and sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders. Outside, a few early joggers passed, their breath rising in clouds. A dog tugged its owner across the crosswalk, tail wagging so hard it seemed to shake the whole leash. Life kept moving, and for the first time in a long time, I felt myself moving with it, not behind it. Around mid-morning, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Michelle. For a moment, I simply watched the name flash. The sound of the ringtone filled the apartment, familiar and distant at the same time. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a voicemail came through. I didn't listen to it, not out of spite, out of clarity. I'd spent years answering immediately, even when I was tired, even when I was busy, even when the calls only brought more weight onto my shoulders. This time the call could wait. I set the phone face down on the table and went back to my coffee. Days passed quietly. I baked. I read. I rejoined my Tai Chi class at the community center. People smiled when I walked in. Someone asked if I wanted to join their group for lunch afterward. I said yes. It was small, ordinary, but it felt like reclaiming something I'd forgotten I was allowed to have. A life, not centered around waiting to be called upon or tolerated less. Just life. One evening, as I watered the small fern by the window, the door buzzer rang. Loud, abrupt, unexpected. My heart thudded once hard against my ribs. No one visited without calling. I stepped to the intercom and pressed the button. Hello? A familiar voice crackled through the speaker. Mom, it's me. Michelle. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Not with fear, not with anger, but with an old instinct. To open the door, to smooth things over, to make it easy. But instinct is not obligation. I breathed in slowly. What is it, Michelle? I was in the neighborhood. I thought we could talk. I looked around my apartment, the warm lamplight, the quiet plants, the mug on the table, the scrap of paper on the fridge that read, "You are not invisible." For years, she had come into every space I made, every offering I brought, every moment I opened, assuming she was welcome because I loved her. And I did love her. But love didn't mean surrender. Not today, I said gently. There was a beat of silence. Mom, please, the kids. This isn't about the kids, I said softly. And we will talk, but not today, not like this. Her exhale crackled through the speaker, a mixture of frustration and something else, something I hadn't heard in a long time. Recognition. Maybe for the first time she was hearing me. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'll call you. I'll answer when I'm ready, I said. Goodbye, Michelle. I lifted my finger from the intercom button. The line went silent. The hallway outside the door stayed still. Inside, the apartment felt the way a home feels when something heavy has finally been set down. I returned to my fern and finished watering the soil. Later that night, as I washed the dinner dishes, I found myself humming, something low, something from years ago, a tune James used to whistle while he stirred the gravy. I smiled without realizing it, not because everything was fixed, but because I was. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to stand on my own without shrinking. Enough to love without erasing myself. Enough to let absence speak when words wouldn't. I dried the last plate, set it gently in the cupboard, and turned off the kitchen light. The apartment settled into quiet, warm, earned, and wholly mine. I walked to the bedroom, slipped beneath the blankets, and let the steady rhythm of my own breathing guide me toward rest. No longing, no waiting, no ache. Just truth. Just peace.